Greetings, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Dreamscapes. Today we have our friend Aaron French from South Lake Tahoe, California area. He is a medium, Akashic reader, and spiritual practitioner or mentor for at least 30 years. You can find him at naturalheartalchemy.com. Link will be in the description below. For my part, would you kindly like, share, and subscribe? Tell your friends. Always need more dreamers, so you can reach out to me. I do video game streams Monday through Friday, most days, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Pacific. What else we got here? This episode brought to you in part by one of my 17 currently available works of historical dream literature, this time featuring book 15, The World of Dreams by Havelock Ellis. Yes, I'm referencing my notes because I can't remember anything. You should also swing on by, of course, you can find all this and more at benjaminthedreamwizard.com, including an encyclopedia and downloadable MP3 versions of this very podcast. So you can take the wizard with you wherever you wander, with or without Wi-Fi. I love alliteration. And the final thing, if you'd swing on by benjaminthedreamwizard.locals.com, it's free to join attached to my Rumble account. If you follow me on Rumble, there's no reason not to be a member. You don't have to give me money. I just want to contact more dreamers so I can put out episodes more regularly. There's way more than enough out of me. Back to Aaron. Thank you for being here. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's great to be here. This is so fun.
Good deal. I love the background you got going on there. I have a deep affinity for wood. And what is the circular? Is it a gong or?
It's a gong. I do gongs, sound healings. I have some gongs on both sides of me as well.
Nice. That immediately makes me think of singing bowls and other things like that. I think there's
this gong in particular, you see those symbols on it, and this actually gong is a time portal. So those are the cycles of time. So I use that in my work to work with time forward and backwards and to bring people in alignment.
Nice.
Yeah,
That's
really powerful tool.
A lot of people are going to look at that kind of thing and go, spooky woo, and dismiss it. Now, I want those people to seek out the internet video it's very popular and it's absolutely scientific. They take black squares of paper basically, and they put a speaker underneath it and they sprinkle salt on it and they play different frequencies, and each frequency has its own shape that appears in the salt. That is not okay. Now make of that what you will, but it's real. Nope, we didn't make that up. That's not invented by mankind. That's the structure of the universe revealing itself. So I'll stop there. Go ahead.
I know that's 100% correct. I mean, and even science, right? So my first career, I was a scientist, and now I'm very much not. But, science even tells us that even our bodies, everything we touch, everything we interact with for our entire lives is all simply vibration and energy. Mm-hmm. And matter is actually made of vibration and energy from one perspective. And so when we use a gong or any other sound healing instruments or even our voice, we're actually connecting deeply into the essence of the people around us through the energy that's all around us. Yeah,
absolutely. No, and see this with so many direct, my brain just goes, and I'm like, where do I go with this? So the thing that popped into my head right then and there is the idea. I call myself a dream wizard, and we have a colloquial or metaphorical understanding of someone who's a whiz. Oh, look at him, he's a whiz with the internet. Your boomer grandmother would say. It just means he's skilled or capable, and I think that's always been the case. That I think we've certainly had wizards or that archetypal person, shamans, all kinds of different things, practitioners of what seem to be esoteric or impossible arts, but it's just, I hesitate to say Illuminati, but it's illuminated ones. It's persons who maybe have access to things that most people don't know, and they're able to use that information in positive and negative ways. So I think wizards are very real. And so we get to that idea of sound, speech, spell casting. I think spell casting is very real in terms of, at the very least, on a psychological level. We know people can be manipulated by words and ideas, and we know people can be benefited by words. That's the whole point of going to a psychologist is, hey, let me talk through my problems. And by exchanging sounds that vibrate our ears and get processed by our brains, what was Joe Rogan said, we're like psychic monkeys that put ideas in each other's heads. It's amazing. So I'm going to stop right there. It's a lot of ideas.
No, I love that. So I actually teach a men's course that I call the Wizard Activation. or excavation sometimes. And the whole point is that, you know, these words, wizard, magician, and witch, and all the ones for the feminine as well, you know, the modern times, they've been subjugated to fairy tales, fantasies, works for children of make-believe.
Yeah.
But, you know, my deep belief and understanding is that, you know, in the last several thousand years, in Western history in particular, all of these ways of us connecting directly with the world around us through our energy have been suppressed vigorously, let's say.
Yeah.
And so the only safe way to keep these traditions alive was to pretend that we're just, oh, these are just fairy tales for kids. They're not threatening to you. But actually, these hold the kernels of truth of what is our birthright for every single one of us. And so I love to say, like, a magician is someone who works with spells and magic in the world, and many of us, you know, who's male perhaps, and the witch, and for the men, you know, the wizard is someone that masters their own energy such that we don't even need to use a spell, because as soon as we think it or embody it, it just becomes real. It becomes so, because we are connected so deeply with the world around us in the universe. Right?
Yeah. And I think
to our core, please.
Oh, no, for sure. Yeah. And I think I have a lot of thoughts about all this kind of stuff because I'm trying to understand it myself. Someday, so I've got works of historical dream literature. I'm republishing stuff from the 1500s, 1600s, preserving this, you know, ancient wisdom going all the way back to literally antiquity in modern volumes, heavily footnote. Okay. But then when that's all done, I've got ideas for a series. And one of them I do want to write is A Wizard's Guide to the Art of Wizardry. Like, what am I doing here? And I've explained this, you know, as far back as forever. Is like, what is the wizard archetype? We see a Gandalf. Well, what are we actually seeing? We're seeing an older person, age being a signifier of long experience in the world. We see the gray beard as another marker. You know, they've been around long enough that their hair has turned white and it's grown long. Walks with a staff maybe because their legs don't work so good. So the idea of is all of these are supposed to be symbolic or visual cues for. So where does wizard come from? It shares roots with the word wizened, meaning old. It's an elder with wisdom, maybe to share. So you can speak those magic words, as I say, give people true or useful information. I had an interesting metaphorical epiphany the other day too. Is, you know, when I do video games, one of my go-to drinks, I do custom cocktails sometimes for each individual game. I haven't done that in a while, but my go-to is the Dream Wizard's Fireball Cider. Like, actually, I can conjure fireballs. You just have to follow the recipe, and you can drink it too. I've never literally thrown fire with my hand. Okay, so all of this to say, I think those people have been, as I said, been with us throughout history.
Absolutely.
I also think there used to be more of a convergence of that religion and science were one and the same thing. It was a study of the natural world to understand the way it works in a way that makes it useful to humans. And I think that's what we get in the Bible. They say things like, you know, it's basic instructions before leaving Earth. Clever, cute, but also, you know, and I'm not a Christian, so I follow and am familiar with and venerate a lot of different traditions. But that one specifically, the idea of, well, let's take all these things we've learned and just put them in one place so we can kind of keep track and it doesn't get lost. And I think that goes for a lot of other different traditions too. And I think there's I think you mentioned like Buddhism in your bio. Tao, the way, is no different than saying when Jesus says, you know, the way, the truth, and life is truth. This is the way. This is how to be in harmony with nature, with human nature, with the physical world. I think a lot of them intersect there. So long story short on this one, but this might be a fascinating tangent too. I have become lately more convinced that there was a Mediterranean civilization about 12,500 years ago, roughly, according to Graham Hancock, with the Younger Dryas impact theory, and that a lot of our current religions, esoteric wisdom, came from remnants of that society. So I think now a lot of people will say, oh, you believe in Atlantis, like an island? Oh, they had flying cars and energy batteries. Well, I don't know about any of that. I think there was a civilization in the Mediterranean. There was a big influential civilization. comet hits the ocean. A huge tidal wave swamps all the coastal lands around there, and what we get left over is what the Greeks put back together in their pantheon, and what the Egyptians put back together in their pantheon, as these remnants survived. And then also you get literally biblical stories of the Great Flood. And I think it was big enough, the impact, that it actually sent a tidal wave all the way to South America and North America as well. And that's why we see those same flood stories there. Every coastal or low river area also got flooded. Long story short on that one, you might be on the same page with me.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot to cover there, but just in terms
I know
of,
I talk too much. Go
you know,
ahead.
the depth of civilizations, right? Every intact spiritual belief and traditional system that I'm aware of from across the globe knows that the humanity comes from really, really deep time by modern scientific standards or modern historical standards, right? So we know that, and even, for example, in the Northern European pagan traditions broadly, using that term in a very broad way,
Sure.
that they speak of, all the tales speak of, they have the new gods and then the old gods. And the old gods were already being forgotten, right? The tales are about the old gods are being left behind and the new gods are here now. And there's a transition of that. Well, there's these periods of cycles of history, of time, of resurgence and passing on. And so there's these cycles of yin and yang and up and down throughout deep history. Now in my channeling and spiritual awareness, I'm in contact with some of the very, very old gods that just tell me how old they are, and they show me the depth of humanity. And even the Akashic records, which I access daily, with many people, we see the depth of time. So, the modern perspective of history, and it's getting farther and farther back. It's going farther and farther back. But it was just maybe 5,000 years, and then it was, a little bit more, and a little bit more. And now we're saying, yeah, clearly there was, in South America, in Asia, in Europe, very intact, mature, robust, complex civilizations, as you say, 12,500 years ago. And I'm certain far before that. Generations before that, the older civilizations, even from that, and scores to go. So absolutely.
I think that's a 10, 12,000 years is a drop in the bucket. I mean, I think the most current, and you're right, it's been pushed back and pushed back. Every time we make a new discovery, I think we've been human as what humans are today. They estimate, or as far as I know, at least 350,000 years. And that means, and now what does that really mean? It's like there's this fuzzy boundary between what were we before and what did we become. And I think the becoming of human is like when we fully went from an animal that wasn't quite self-aware to one that started to see itself in the world and develop the capacity to negotiate with the future. We started, it's kind of the point where we gained the magic power of really understanding cause and effect and incorporating some ideas like, wait, I can sacrifice today and get twice as much tomorrow? Really? That was magic. And that was something that I think that was something the first wizards, so to speak, way back when discovered and were able to, and the people, the humans around them that weren't quite caught up with that were like, that's amazing. How does he do that? They just didn't. It's almost like a dog thinking, where'd the ball go? Where'd the ball go? It disappeared. It went through the wall. The dog's freaking out. So it's kind of that comparison. But, I hate to say that there were some humans for whom other humans were dogs, but they weren't. The whole of the species hadn't transitioned over at that time. And I pushed that back to at least 3. We're probably going to find out it's older than that, 500,000.
It's older than that. Yeah. And we can take that now. And I used to be an evolutionary biologist and ecologist, so I know all that. And I have friends who study human evolution and human history in that way. And I'm going to take it in a different direction, though. And there's, increasing, and this is a big word, but I'm going to say increasing evidence and, informed speculation that part of this evolution of humanity was the interaction and potentially interbreeding and certainly influence of other species and other beings, potentially from other realms around universe and universes across time, right? So, like right now sitting here, my experience as a human, and I believe entirely it's everyone's birthright, that we are connected energetically and psychically to realms of beings beyond the senses of this three-dimensional realm.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly we know from the historical record that there were civilizations that were entirely connected to those energies in ways that we're not now. Even the Egyptians, to use a well-documented, safe example, were connected spiritually and energetically in ways that we are not now. And there's strong, inference to say that there was deep connections and information received, whether it's through interbreeding or simply contact with realms of beings that are not human and not from this physical earth.
Oh, yeah.
That would hasten this evolution, that would hasten this awakening into humanity of, there's more to experience.
Oh, yeah.
This earth.
And if you look at, okay, so there's a lot of connecting the dots I'm trying to do too, which, wow, the more you say, I'm like, wow, it's like this thing. So we look at a modern phenomenon. Technologically advanced first world nations tend to experience a birth decline because they're no longer in the what's K and R selected kind of breeding patterns. They have fewer offspring, invest more time in them, that kind of thing. So it is entirely likely that maybe there was or have been many instances of past civilizations that were highly advanced and faded out and interbreeded then with what was left over.
That's right.
And then that became humanity. I have no problem. So where am I? I am a credulous skeptic. I am willing to believe, right? I'm willing to believe anything. My bar for proof is pretty high, but I will entertain any notion, and I love these ideas. It's wonderful. I led with, to give you an idea of where I'm coming from. I led with Atlantis. There's people are gonna look at me like, you're nuts. Well, I think I'm a wizard, so realize who you're dealing with here. But then again, if I were to tell, so I bring the same thing to my dream interpretation and work. I do draw a hard line for myself between what I lovingly call spooky woo. I can't prove it, but man, it's fascinating and probably true. But I know what I can do in terms of personal symbolic meaning, helping someone see that from a purely hard science psychological. So even though I split those out in my practice, I'm not dismissing anything. And I think it's all entirely fascinating. And the other thing I was going to say real quick before I throw it back to you, and this might be an interesting thing, is the longer I think about it, the more I believe ideas exist in I can never remember if it's Aristotle or Plato, but the world of forms, that there's and a great way to understand it is kind of like resonant frequencies or extra dimensional beings in a way. There's an essence of these. So another book I hope to write someday, maybe. I got all these ideas and then I just spend my time arguing with people on Twitter. But I think angels and demons are real beings, especially when they and if you look at, so the book I want to write is A Wizard's Guide to Angels and Demons. And the idea is we can invite into us, we can embody different modes of being in the world. So if we want to embody, say, the spirit of generosity, we welcome that essence into us and we try to enact it. And I think that's a real frequency, or whatever you want to call it out there, that we can tap into, connect with, let our personal vibration align with it, and then we have that effect in the world. I'm going to stop there. That's a lot to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, and like right now, currently, I'm teaching a class on connecting with your angels and spirit guides.
There you go.
And I interact with these beings, and angels. I say angels and spirit guides, and I would say that, there's a whole constellation of related energies, related beings that can include demons of various kinds. Although many of those could be a whole other category of sort of darker, heavier energies that are not angelic, but there's energy itself. This is a small digression, but energy itself, the universe itself is inherently neutral. There's a goodness to the neutrality, but there's an inherently neutral. Like in English, we have this strange perspective, if you think about it, that with any gradients of difference, we always attribute there's a good portion and a bad portion. There's always preference and judgment placed upon a gradient, light and dark and up and down and good and bad and more and less and all these things. But in reality, these all need to exist. You can't have more without less. You can't have the light without the dark, otherwise the light doesn't exist.
Yeah, the yin yang balance.
That's a little
opposites.
aside.
Yeah.
So I know, so I know personally that all of these beings, various forms from various realms, angels, demons, spirit guides, gods, etc., from all realms exist fully. I know that, but it's not from my brain. So it's not, I have an amazing brain. Many of us do, and we can think and rationalize and cognate all day long. That's not actually where we connect. We connect from our heart space. In Taoism, they speak of the heart wisdom. And there's the wisdom of the body. There's the wisdom of our psychic connection. There's the wisdom of the vibrational truth of the universe that allows us to reach out through these conduits of energy. And that's how we receive information. And the thing is, our five senses are just a different piece of the spectrum of that vibrational energy. Everything is vibrational energy, as we said. So these beings, you were talking about these realms of thought and ideas out in space-time. Those weren't your words. Yes, for example, I go frequently to the Akashic field, the Akashic records, and the way I experience this is simply a vibrational frequency that is a band of energy wherein all the energies of humanity are captured across all time. Because time, we know scientifically, this is not made up woo-woo, this is science. We know that our brain manufactures time in 5 different ways. This is like MIT research. Our brain manufactures time in 5 different ways. We have different time machines in our mind, but there's no actually inherent time. We manufacture it. And this is hard science that is not contested at this point. And that's why for all of us, time can speed up and slow down and have these various experiences of what it means to move through our day. I'm shown as a human that by my guides that, we experience time on Earth because we come here to this realm. Without experiencing the connection of time, we wouldn't experience the disconnection from the universe. In our path in this lifetime, the most broad way to say what is our purpose of life is actually to be separate. We choose Earth to become separate so that we can find our way back to unity of all things. So we could say, we could use the word God, we can find our way back to God, we can find our way back to the connection with the universe, and there's many other ways to speak of this.
Yeah.
We can't experience that if it's happened without time. It's too instantaneous. We don't get the gradations of the glory. So actually, even like having all the difficulties, having the darkness allows us to see the light with that much more rapturous joy than we can if it's just always in the light, for example. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Without some kind of comparison, it's not really possible to get an idea of what's going on. And also it's like I'd say the comparison to the human experience, or the analogy would be focusing on one thing at a time to really experience it. Like be here now in a way of like, I'm on a roller coaster. I want to feel my gut drop when we hit the curves and the excitement and the adrenaline and whatnot. Focus on one thing at a time. Or athletes, when they say they're in the zone, they're doing one thing perfectly in harmony with the best possible way to achieve a goal. There's a couple of things I wanted to say too. Like you mentioned feeling things in the chest. That is a key element to what I do with the dream stuff. Is I just throw spaghetti at the wall until you go, oh, I felt something. I felt that zing, I call it, where you're like, okay, that means something to me personally.
Nice.
So that's a big part of my practice. I'm always I tell people, I'm just some crazy guy on the internet who thinks he's a wizard. I have none of the answers. I don't hear the voice of God. I don't talk to spirits. I talk to you. You have the experience. You are the expert. I say, people invite me into their head to stand behind their shoulder with a flashlight going, do you see what I see? What if we look at it from a different angle? That's the hard science aspect of what I'm trying to bring to it. That's just me, my practice. But then the zing's got to be there. And the zing, I can't explain it. I can't make it happen either. So that's one thing. Another thing I wanted to say is that, speaking of positive and negative forces in the ether, so to speak, one this is what kind of inspired me to say, well, I should probably write that book someday, is ancient wisdom says there are 2 different sources of understanding, broadly speaking. And this, I'm still trying to formulate the words for this kind of thing, but we have the demon Stolas and the angel Uriel. I believe Uriel is the proper, and in my estimation, or as far as I can distill it down, they look at 2 different ways of approaching learning in the world. One is Uriel, the supposedly positive way. You receive wisdom from people elders perhaps, but people who care about you and want you to succeed. So there's a positive vibe to receiving the spirit of Uriel. You learn something useful, important, and carry it forward in the world. Then there's Stolas, which is, in my estimation, the school of hard knocks. You can bang your head against the wall until you finally figure it out. And we might look at people and say, so why are they why is one an angel and why is one a demon? Well, it's maybe better if you don't have to learn the hard way, if you don't have to suffer, if you don't have to be harmed by the learning process. If you can learn, there's a better way to learn. So we just look at it by comparison. And then it gets embodied as like, well, demons want to hurt you. No, they are the essence of hurt in a way. It's like you just want to avoid them because maybe it's not even their fault. Maybe there's no malicious intent. It's like that is what they are. That is their nature. And so they just do their nature just like angels do. So I can stop there too. There's a lot to throw back at you.
Yeah, but I love that. But I'm actually gonna take that back a little bit.
Sure.
And
feel free to disagree.
Yeah, absolutely. My guidance says, in my experience and my guidance, what I'm shown and revealed, both in the Akashic records and from my spirit guides and angels, is that our souls, there's lots of choices. There are many universes, many realms that our souls can experience.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
There's many realms, whatever word we want to use. There's many places we can go. And we choose Earth specifically. And this is, I want to say with all compassion to people who are suffering and having a difficult experience, because from the individual experience, things can be really hard. But I'm shown again and again in my own personal life, we choose Earth specifically actually to experience the darkness, the hard traumas, because that again shows us the connection with the light so much deeper. And we don't get these experiences, right? So when our souls are in between, whatever word we want to use for that place, and connected to all things, when there's no time and there's no suffering there. So there's no experience. There's glory, there's bliss, and it's beautiful. But they're coming to Earth in particular to have the hard experience. And for the soul, again, there's a range of experience, and what they're looking for is the difference. And so for us humans, from my own life, I've had all kinds of traumas and really difficult experiences. Things have been tough, and I've cried and hurt and gnashed my teeth and wailed and said, why me? Now I'm in a place where through all that, those are also the ways in which we grow, right? Our darkness is the cheat code that allows us to propels us into the light if we choose to take that route. But so the demon, to get back to your point, it's not even that it's doing us a favor, right? These energies are doing us a favor, to use this kind of a language, by showing us the whole range of what's possible. And in the absolute sense, there's only goodness, even though on the human sense, it can be excruciating and horrific. Any individual person, again, all compassion to the suffering that's happening all around the world right now.
That's very tough. And it's hard to express that as a theory or a concept without people saying, what's the uncharitable interpretation? Oh, so you think we should increase suffering so that people have the experience they came here for? No, I know that's absolutely not what you're saying.
Because there's a balance of energies. There's a balance of right, and even like regardless of what you believe right now here in America about the current situation here in February of 2025, everyone can see that there is a wide spectrum of beliefs and ideas and experiences happening right now. Let's just say that, right?
Sure.
There's a vastly wide differences of perspective and then experiences happening with the same acts, the same events occurring. There's a wide spectrum of interpretation and feeling around what's happening around that.
It's true.
And that's happening more and more as more and more of us, there is this mass awakening happening right now. We're in this period of transition across all calendars. We're going from, the end of the Kali Yuga into the new age, into the age of Aquarius, with this transition of the Mayan calendar past the old dates. All these traditions have this transition into a new era. And in this new era, there's a mass awakening, a mass rising of energy. And in that, as there's more light, there also has to be more chaos and darkness inherently, until we actually phase shift into a new place. Until that happens, which who knows when that will be. Until that, there will be more and more and more increasingly these poles of the pendulum are going to be farther apart.
Absolutely. And it just struck me how interesting it is that 60 some odd years ago, they started to pre-celebrate the age of Aquarius. We're even writing songs
Absolutely.
about it. They were way
Yeah.
ahead of schedule. Like maybe even some of those people aren't going to live to see it. Maybe many of them have already passed, of course.
Cosmic time are so big that they were feeling the whispers of the early change, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's different calendars and beliefs, but using the Vedic system of the yugas, right? I mean, the timeline of these changes are far beyond the human lifespan.
Oh, yeah.
There's
For sure.
many thousands of years. So these periods of transition are many thousands of years potentially. So for many of us, but that said, my experience, I'm 53. My experience today is different of the earth is different than it was when I was born, and certainly very different from my parents and grandparents. There was a density and a closed-minded energy in the world that now there's an openness and a light that wasn't there
I think so
100
too.
years ago.
And very often you have to go through certain struggles and in order to get where you're going. There's no other way. That's also kind of part of that negotiating with the future sacrificial framework too. Is like there's gonna be some pain involved. Now the good news is very often you get to choose the pain. Which one do you prefer? Because something is going to happen. And you get to be, and then you're going to be on the other side of it. So whatever it is, you kind of can work within different paths. Just going back to what you said about the idea of coming here to learn lessons, or I mean, that's a very ancient idea too. I don't think either one of us
absolutely
invented that, nor are the first one to say it. But I had that epiphany myself years ago. I was like, if that's true, then I did this to myself. Fuck. Why did I do that?
So there's a liberation to that, right? Isn't there a liberation to that?
There is in some ways. I'm like, well, then, that's the good news and the bad news in a way. But now I can look back. At first it was a horrifying thought. Now I'm like, and that's the thing too, is like I do, and this is a hard thing to explain to some people who have, especially Christians, who have a very particular view of the world. But I think what we are, what our soul is a tiny spark of the universal soul. Now, again, this is an ancient idea that not to take anything away from Christians. I mean, what is the soul and how did it come to be? And, so this is my theory of it too. And that when we all come back together, like it all becomes one soul again, and every experience we inflicted upon another, we get to experience it as that person. And that I think is what makes the afterlife heaven or hell for us. What do I get back from what I put in on the other side? Yeah. And if I've spread a bunch of pain, I'm like, every person I ever hurt, I'm going to feel that as if I was them, because I am and was them. The Beatles hit on that years ago. I am you and you are me, and we are all together. I think that's definitely what's going on here. But then you get the Christian folks, and I mean, just if there's any Christian folks out there, it's like, this is not to say from the Gnostic perspective that we are all individually gods. That is not how this works, in my opinion. No. So I wanted to throw that back to you, but I also wanted to make sure we don't skip over the idea of explaining maybe a bit to folks what the Akashic record is and how you access it. And so I'll stop there and throw it all back to you. So.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I love this idea that, we are not individually as humans on earth gods. Because we're chosen to be here. And yet our souls are, as you say, are pieces of the same whole. Mm-hmm. And this is, if you go back to the original,
it's all one piece back
if you go back to the original words of Jesus, right? I mean, this is what he was saying.
I think so.
In my perspective,
right?
Absolutely.
Or at least it fits. Yeah.
It absolutely fits for sure. Right. Mm-hmm. And controversial or not, my deep perspective and also history, there is a thread of history that supports this entirely, was that, the Bible as we know it was created hundreds of years after the life of Christ. Mm-hmm. 150, the books were written 150, 200 years after, and then it was codified like 400 years after Christ died into form of the modern Bible, and then interpreted and translated many times since then. And so, the modern Christian church is not inherently the absolute, and there's many books that aren't in the current Bible, et cetera, right? So, but when you just go back to the original, try to find, as deep as we can, the original words of Jesus himself, these ideas of the unity of our soul is deeply embedded in the words, if you read it in that way, for sure.
Yeah.
The Akashic records are nice little segue there, right?
No. That was my next question.
Akashic records
and
are
honestly, take your time. Give as much history as you want. Talk as long as you want. Yeah. We got nothing but time, so you don't feel like you have to give the
this is fun
30-second
because
thumbnail.
Yeah, so I was, for years, I've studied different traditions, but for years I studied Taoism, Taoist teacher. Um, and before that, I had a tantric, a Shiva tantric teacher, a guru of mine, um, and learned a lot of the classical Vedic Shivite teachings and lessons. And so in both those traditions, they're deeply, in some ways, animist, deeply aware of the multifaceted nature of the universe, aware of lots of different perspectives of it, but lots of gods to interact with, lots of spirits, a lot of awareness that this universe is very full. Mm-hmm. There's lots of layers of existence and experience that we can have, and that, again, our five senses are not complete. And our birthright as humans is to experience the universe far deeper than our five senses, and science at this point in time acknowledges is, quote, real. So I had that experience. So I've traveled in various contexts to many different realms, interacting with many beings across decades. And it was only I'll just say less than 5 years ago when I first had some readings. Finally I was like, oh, what's this Akashic record thing? I'm going to have a whole series of, like, actually I booked, like, I think 5 or 6 readings in a package with somebody, and said, okay, I'm going to see what this is about and explore this realm. This is fun. So the first time we sat down, it was over Zoom. I work with energy, so I just sort of traveled along with Amy, the practitioner, up into the realms of the Akashic records. We got there. I sort of followed her along when she went up to join the records for me. And we got there, and I was like, oh, I know this place. I just didn't know that's what it was called. I didn't know what it was. It's just a realm of energy that I'd say it's like a playground for me. I never used it. So I was like, oh, I can go here easily, and I go here all the time. I just didn't use it in that way or interpret it in the way that I do now. I just go there and play around, and sometimes I would get insights. I was like, so what I learned when I learned to read the Akashic records is, oh, here's a whole method of asking specific questions and pulling down specific insights for a specific purpose in a very intentional way from this field of energy, which contains all the information from all humans across all time. So people speak of the Akashic records as a library of information, a library of all time, a library of all things. There's a hall of records. People would say it's a hall of records. There's images of this collection of books. Of course, books are this euphemism energetically of information collected across time. And, the images that people give, they can be different. We can experience the vastness of the energy differently, but it's infinite. These halls, these libraries are as tall as up until the darkness and out into the darkness, no matter how many lights there are. They're infinite. And there's record keepers. There are these beings who are there to make sure that we're interacting from our hearts with love and intention, because everything is available. The information, these are the databases of all things. And again, science does say that all time is now. Mm-hmm. This is hard science. It does say that, again, time doesn't exist. All time is now, and we can perceive this expansion or this experience of flow of time. So if any human has ever lived, which we are, then that vibration of our energy exists. And it doesn't, and there's a conservation of matter and energy and vibration. It doesn't disappear. And so there's an imprint of that which is collected in this vibrational band. Again, that's how I see it. There's an imprint of all of our experiences that are collected simply by, just like, when you mix oil and water and different, and molasses, for example. So you'll have molasses float to the bottom, and then the water, and then the oil. Or, there's different ways you can do those experiments. Mm-hmm. It's the same. It's as simple as that. There's this vibrational energy of the imprint of our existence, of our experiences, which sort of filter to a certain level of energetic experience in the astral planes, broadly. And in that, it's a place we can go. And if we're in tune with the vibration, so if I'm working with you, before I access the records, I'll tune into your energy and your questions and what's current for you right now. Mm-hmm. Me personally, like I work with the records to pull down information to activate and clarify your soul purpose and your highest timeline here on Earth. That's my purpose. So I'm not here specifically to this is information from all time. So it's not like just to give you a bunch of random information about past lives or experiences, because that could be fun, but kind of useless. So I'm here specifically to call through information for you based on your soul's experiences across time that can activate and free you from your mind's constraints, perhaps, and your energetic constraints, to allow you to be more present, more clear, more engaged, more focused, and more aligned with your soul's purpose, and live a happier, healthier, more engaged life.
Very cool. Very cool. That's like, I think it's a great overview, explanation of like, what are you doing? What is this thing, and how can people conceptualize it and understand it? Because I think there are some people who think the Akashic record is a bunch of old scrolls someone found in a jar in the desert years ago. Not exactly. Yeah. Not quite.
Exactly.
Not quite.
And some people can't experience. Listen, I receive information. I'm claircognizant mostly, different ones as well, where I receive images and information sort of pushed to me, and then I translate the information and images into words. Some people, though, I know, my friends, do actually go to a place where they actually do open energetically in their minds books or scrolls.
Sure.
And read information.
Sure.
So people can interpret it that way, and that's also real and true for them. Those are the same. I see it as bands of energy that I pull information from, but people can 100% do experience it as literally like the open
Sure.
books and see people's past lives or read about them. So I have friends and colleagues who do that work. Yeah.
Just to give the clarification to folks out there who, it's not like the Akashic record is not like the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's not a physical object.
Yeah, 100%.
Exactly.
Yeah, 100%.
That's what I'm looking at explaining. Is like, so what is this thing? But a bunch of,
there you go.
A bunch of,
sure.
explosion in the brain. Yeah. And I'm going to actually get to that idea as well.
Perfect.
But first of all, the idea of the five senses. And, for the longest time, we have glommed onto these because they're descriptions of how humans sense the world physically. And, we touch, taste, sound, sight, and smell. And fair enough, those are our sensory organs, and that's absolutely true. And people think of those as the real senses in a way because they're material, and we're a lot more, we're highly empiricist from the rationalist Enlightenment and whatnot, and okay, and this is coming from my review of the material of all these books I'm republishing. The idea of opening up our mind again to the spiritual, big in the late 1800s and whatnot. And that's where we first got the introduction of the idea of a sixth sense, which is non-physical. And then we realized we actually have a lot more than five physical senses. And one of my favorite is proprioception, the idea that I can close my eyes and touch my nose. I know where my body physically is in space. And that's why they can do that test when you're drunk, because you lose proprioception. You start poking yourself in the eye. Long story short of that. So there are even more than five senses physically. Then you get into, okay, so how many non-physical senses are there? And we get a sense of, I think what most people might call intuition. And where is that coming from? Especially when it's correct, when it's not just a paranoid fear because we're skittish, vulnerable little animals, and we're the descendants, say, of all those ancient peoples who ran away from the tiger, rather than going, oh, I wonder what's in the bush, and getting eaten. Even if there's no tiger in the bush, it's probably better if you assume there is. So we get a strong tradition of paranoia coming down to us. So it's no wonder we're fearful animals. Pretty easy to get hurt. But long story short, we can even think of, and you tell me what you think of this idea too. The idea that in some ways, the Akashic record is like what Jung stumbled on with the collective unconscious. Is that almost synonymous?
I think so. Not to pretend to know what Jung was thinking or intending. And I think that, as I understand Jung, which I know, let's say, moderately well. So any people out there who know better, please correct me. I'm happy for that.
But
my experience with Jung, yeah, absolutely. My experience with Jung is that he did take it in some other directions too, sort of a Western scientific constraint on that energy. So I'll just say, yes, but I feel like in the most expansive way.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what Jung did, and this is my understanding, take it for what it's worth. Source, he's me, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there are multiple shades of meaning, and definitely Jung came from a time when they were leaning into animism. I think that's the word for it. The idea that our biology has memory just as much as our genes have memory to reproduce blue eyes and that kind of thing. And that actually there's an esoteric spiritual component to collective unconscious and a real physical, say they used to call it racial memory. And they weren't saying, oh, black people have one memory. No, the human race has a memory of our from our ancestors. And actually, one of my favorite books, Frank Herbert's Dune, talks about that actually what the Bene Gesserit and the drinking the spice water in the desert with the Fremen allowed them to do was access ancestral memories. You could have conversations with your great-great-great-grandfather, and he would, give you wisdom that you could use today. Here's what I experienced. Now, we do that by writing books and passing down memoirs and collected volumes of wisdom like the Bible and the Tao Te Ching. So those are my ideas. So there's all those different levels. I think he encompassed all of them. And it looks like you have a comment. I'll stop. I talk too much.
Oh, that's good. But, so you mentioned grandfathers and ancestors. I mean, I first realized or became aware as a kid, I was pretty open to lots of experiences, let's just say. But then you get a little older and, we're taught to ignore those, pretend they were fantasy and make believe. So in my adulthood, the first time I realized that I was psychic and connecting to spirits was after my grandfather passed. And I was a biologist. I was living in the rainforest in Africa, totally cut off from Western society for months at a time. And I didn't learn of my grandfather's passing until like 6 months after he passed. But there was a period in there when I was thinking of him deeply every day for like a week, 10 days. And I was thinking of him. I mentioned to my friends, I wrote it in my journal. I was like, oh, I'm thinking of my grandfather. When I go back, I need to go see him. It's been a while. He was really like, quote, on my mind in a really intense way that was unusual for me. And 6 months later, I come back to the US and I learned from my father, oh, your grandfather passed. He didn't want to bother me in the forest and tell me and worry me. And I asked, okay, exactly when was that? And it lined up exactly with that period of time when he was, on my mind in this deep way for about a week.
Yeah.
And it really just like blew open my awareness that, okay, that wasn't random and those weren't actually thoughts.
Yeah.
I was connecting in a different way.
It's just the way of fantasy. Yeah.
Yeah. And from then on, other family members, other of my ancestors started to speak to me, contact me and want to interact with me, live out some of their energies through me. And that opened the door, over many years to this expansive connection now to many levels of beings. But I work with people, every day doing ancestral healing and clearing, because a lot of our ancestors, if they're hanging around in this realm and interacting with us, it means that they're still attached to this experience of Earth. And so what that means is that there's some part of them that usually it means some part of them didn't receive all the experiences they wanted to while they were alive.
Sure.
So there's no time after death. So it could feel like a second to them or whatever it does. There's no time. So it could be your great-great-great-great-grandfather or grandmother because it's just an instant for them. They're not hanging around for generations from their perspective, these spirits, these ghosts, these energies, these ancestral energies. So they can have multiple generations back across time. But if there's, for example, there's a word that applies to mostly the feminine, the witch wound. Have you heard this term, the witch wound?
No, I don't think so.
Which, and it's just a nice alliteration, as you say.
Sure.
But it applies to men as well, of course. But it's the idea that, witches across time have been persecuted for the last several thousand years. In all kinds of ways. But, for the masculine and feminine, the idea in the Western world that we could have our direct experience with the spiritual interaction with the earth, with healing, with nature, with all things has been stamped out. And we had to go through, the church, society, whatever exact culture we were in to interact, right? In many cultures, this has been true. So for many generations, for thousands of years, there has been this continuous reinforced knowledge that it's not safe to be spiritually open. It's not safe to express your spiritual gifts freely and openly, connect, talk to trees and use medicines that are from the plant wisdoms and all of these things. So our ancestors, I have many people come to me and say like, oh, I know I should do this, but I don't feel safe. One of the reasons, there's many factors, but one of the reasons absolutely is that there's ancestral energies, the grandmothers and grandfathers saying like, we did that and we got murdered. We did that and we got clubbed or at the very least, like run out of the village and ostracized or whatever it was across time. And those energies are still impacting us in this body today. So, for example, one of the things I do is go in there and speak and talk to the ancestors and sort of energetically untangle those energies of fear and oppression so that we're no longer in this space and time impacted by those past wounds on our ancestral line.
For sure. Yeah. And speaking of your experience, say with your uh, grandfather and having those thoughts suddenly, spontaneously occur to you. Why would that? Now we could go strictly materialist and say, well, you saw a physical object that you associated with your grandfather, and therefore the thought was inspired, cause and effect, no big deal. But I've heard too many stories like this, and I've read.
I was in the rainforest. I was in a tent in the rain. This is why it was so strong for me. I was in a tent in the rainforest with like no personal objects. I had my stuff for my work. I wasn't at home with a picture of him or anything like that.
Yeah,
I wasn't hearing stories from my dad or anything at all that was family related. But this is why it was so strong for me as well. There was nothing there to have reminded me beyond my own mind, perhaps. But
oh yeah, well, even then, if we lean extremely heavily into pure materialist, empirical, psychological, whatever, connect the dots, we still don't understand why that works that way. I mean, even though the mechanism of action of a lot of these things is fuzzy, it's almost like there's a lot more things in the world or the universe that appear to function, or the human understanding of it appears to function like gravity. Well, we know it when we see it. We know it by what it does. Therefore, gravity is the thing that does this thing we can observe. Okay, well, why? Oh, no one has any idea. And this is the funniest thing. There was those, I don't know if you ever heard of the Insane Clown Posse. These the rapper. Okay, no, I think they are a genius parody. Some people take them seriously, but I think they knew exactly what they were doing and they leaned into it. It's all an act. They're not, of course it's an act, but I think it's an intentional parody. Yes. Well, they made a video, magnets. How do they work? And everyone goes, the clowns, magnets. And you go, wait a minute, we have no idea how magnets work. They just do. We know it by what it does. Long story short on that one there. I'm always comparing this to, how am I going to keep the conversation going? So let's compare this to my own work too. Is like, we don't understand inspiration. I think there's more magic in the world than we realize. And so you have say a pyramid of knowledge leading you towards the ability to then make a new revelation, have a eureka moment. There was before Archimedes discovered water displacement, and there was the moment of discovery. And there at the top of that pyramid of knowledge is a gap between, and then this is how it's represented in the ancient, drawings and whatnot, the all-seeing eye, the flame at the top. There's a gap, and in that gap is where the magic happens between the pyramid of knowledge and the inspiration, the conception of a new idea or a thought you've never had before, or something like that. So relating this to my own work, I open myself to the spirit of being beneficial to the person I'm talking to. What can I tell them that is true and useful about their own situation? And then that is not me looking at the available realm of all useful things and saying, I choose this one. It is that insight putting itself in my head by just opening myself like a giant rain collector, and I don't know which drops are going to fall in.
I love it.
What falls in is hopefully something useful because I've oriented myself properly towards that energy. I can't tell you how I do that. I have no idea how I do what I do insofar as it actually works out. This is why I relate, and this is a ramble almost done, but I relate myself a lot of ways to the football player who's like, I caught the touchdown, they get on one knee and they, point to the sky and they're like, all glory to God. I didn't create this body I'm in. And now I used it, but I hit the zone and accomplished physical things that, man, you asked me to do it twice. I couldn't do it. I could barely promise you I could successfully do it once, and yet it happened. And I can't explain that. So I'm very open to never knowing some things, just doing it because it works and it seems to get positive results. So I'll stop there. Yeah.
Oh, and that's true. And I don't have any direct quotes right now. I'm racking my brain for a moment, but Einstein talked about this a lot as well. He talked about these spontaneous rivals of insight where he would rack his brain, and there's all the pictures of him usually in front of the chalkboard of
making all those funny faces
of all those things. But in reality, that was him bringing forward these moments of insight, which he says he has, which allowed him to see truth. And then he had to figure out how to make that work mathematically and in the world of the frameworks that he knew, right? It's the same as, across all time. I mean, I'm just thinking about like Eckhart Tolle right now, who's revere as a spiritual master alive right now. And he says, he just sits on a park bench and meditates, then opens his book and writes, and he's helped millions of people achieve inner peace and awakening through that. So from Einstein to Eckhart Tolle across all time, most of the stories of, as you say, true innovation, true growth of our knowledge don't actually come from process of thought.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah, that can only get us so far.
We gain the insight, and then we use our process of thought and rational ability to write down, categorize, order to this inspiration that comes to us and bring it to the world. That all takes our mind. But
Absolutely.
the insights themselves come from beyond. And, you know, I wanted to go back to the five senses too, six senses,
Sure.
many senses that we have too, and just go back to the idea scientifically that, you know, we know our eyes and our ears are both receivers of these narrow bands of vibrational frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there's no difference between what our eyes receive and our ears receive, except for the frequency band of the waves coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Our eyes can receive certain frequencies that are much smaller, and as the waves get bigger, then they become, we call them, quote, sound waves, and then our ears can hear them.
Mm-hmm.
Between those two, there's gaps, and below and above them are gaps, and science knows this.
Oh, yeah.
Inherently, this has been known. This is, you know, taught in elementary schools forever, right? So there's no secret that we're only receiving a small portion of the information which we know already exists. And still, there's skepticism in science that we have other receptors in the body receive this. You know, we know scientifically that actually there are nerve cells all up and down the spinal column in our hearts, which these clusters of nerve cells, which are the same as clusters in the brain to receive information and process information. We know this. And we know that, you know, the whole spine, there's a full collection of nerve endings and this radiant network, which is a receiver.
Mm-hmm.
This is a receiver of information. You know,
sure.
We're receiving vibrational, and our hearts as well have these clusters of cells that are both thinking, quote, in whatever way, but also receiving information, vibrations, and frequencies, and beyond. Our whole bodies are these energetic creators. So science is getting there to understand, you know, the broader implications of, you know, our human bodies are deeply powerful on levels far beyond what we're currently using them for.
Oh yeah, and that reminds me of I don't know if you've ever been to or seen the Human Body Works, where they plasticize. Yeah. And what they did was I remember seeing one, and it was, I was reminded by an image on Twitter the other day of they plasticized and extracted the entire network of our nervous system and all the different places to go. When you look at it, that's one freaky octopus looking alien critter. And it's like, you know, we are not our bodies as much as we are this creature, this nervous tangle of branching webs, which connect to every organ. And as you're saying, we've got in effect brain cells in our heart, in our stomach, in our guts. And when you say, I got a gut feeling, you literally do. And that's also that zing too, is like, in some ways it's okay to metaphoricalize it as when chakras align or something. There's this full connection between these different areas of thinking where they all resonate with the same frequency. They all have the same thought at the same time in some ways. And I guess to loop it around too, is like when you were describing the Akashic record, it's probably fair enough to say that what I'm able to provide through no fault of my own is some connection with that place where that useful information pre-exists. And I'm just able to kind of say, hey, what if this happens? And that's why I'm a big fan. I've always been, you know, in love with Greek mythology. Was kind of my first love. I'm like, oh, Hercules and these stories of the gods and Zeus and different things. And you know, it's not, what am I trying to say? It's, there's no reason to dismiss the concept they had of the muses. You know, if you are an artist, the muses whisper or shout or sing or dance. They do whatever they do in their own time, in their own way, and all you can do is be ready to receive it and act upon it when it comes. You can romance or you could romance the muses in a way. You can entice them to respond, but they're going to do it in their own way, in their own time, or not at all. And tough luck for you. But okay, so looking at the time, we're about an hour into the recording, and I want to give you the right amount of time for an experience of the dream interpretation thing. You ready to roll over?
Yeah.
All right, let's do that here. I'll just put
let's get into it.
1 hour on here. There we go. That was just about perfect. Sometimes these things go long, sometimes they go shorter. So All right. So for the dream interpretation portion, as per my usual process, I'm going to shut up and listen. Step one for gaining any kind of wisdom and meditation and hearing the music of the spheres. Our friend's going to tell us his dream, and then we're going to talk about it and we're going to figure it out together. So I am ready when you are.
Benjamin the Dream Wizard wants to help you pierce the veil of night and shine the light of understanding upon the mystery of dreams. Every episode of his Dreamscapes program features real dreamers gifted with rare insight into their nocturnal visions. New Dreamscapes episodes appear every week on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, and other video hosting platforms, as well as free audiobooks exploring the psychological principles which inform our dream experience, and much, much more. To join the wizard as a guest, reach out across more than a dozen social media platforms and through the contact page at benjaminthedreamwizard.com, where you will also find the wizard's growing catalog of historical dream literature available on Amazon, documenting the wisdom and wonder of exploration into the world of dreams over the past 2,000 years. That's Benjamin the Dream Wizard on YouTube and at benjaminthedreamwizard.com.
This was a dream I had just about a week ago, and I'll just share my dream.
Yeah.
We'll go from there, right? Yeah. So it started out as I was driving in a car, and it was it was at nighttime, a little bit raining. It was a futuristic, or it was retro future, maybe steampunk kind of thing, the long hoods, kind of narrow car. So I guess, a retro future vehicle kind of thing. It wasn't like anything modern. And I was alone, open convertible, small little windshield, sure, sort of retro car. And driving in the rain, my visibility was pretty limited. And then I go off a cliff and I'm flying through the air. Yeah, and I'm flying unmoored through the air. I'm falling for a long time. I see that there's a body of water beneath me. And as I'm falling, and I fall out of the car, the air. I'm heavy, and I drop through the water. And as I drop through the water, I go into another realm where all of a sudden I just land comfortably, safely in a very dark, I want to say, forest or orchard. And I say orchard because the trees are all sort of the same size. They all look like one kind of tree. It could be, it's as if it was lit maybe by moonlight, perhaps, but I don't see the moon, but it's sort of like a light bluish purple color. The whole scene. I'm looking up and there's all these trees. It's winter, perhaps. I only say that. I wasn't cold or hot, but I know that because the trees had no leaves. So yeah, the trees had no leaves. And I knew that, well, I don't know that I knew. What happened next in the dream was that all of a sudden, I guess so, I knew that I needed to prune the trees. So, some clippers, I guess, appeared in my hands. I'm not quite sure how they got there. And then there were clippers, big loppers, and I started to open up. I was pruning the trees to open up my view of the sky. It was creating space. So it was less about the trees themselves. It was that I knew I needed to open up the view, open up the vista. And I was pruning these branches, sort of reaching up. It was hard work. I was reaching up above my head with these big loppers, like flipping off these branches, these limbs from the trees to open up vista. And as I did that, I became aware that these trees were all part of me. That I was pruning or editing or shifting my life. This is where, question mark, experiences, question mark. I remember puzzling over this in the dream, pondering this and not having clarity, but having the clarity that like, I know that this somehow is me. So it was sort of, I would say maybe this would be potentially loosely a semi-lucid dream where I had a little bit of awareness, but I certainly wasn't awake and active in terms of my own energy. I was definitely in the dream, but I had a little bit of awareness that I was like, doing something, and what does this mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so I was pruning these trees, and I knew I was sort of editing, pruning parts of myself, my experience, to open up the view. And it wasn't scary, but it was a little bit ominous. Not in like there's going to be some werewolves jumping out at me, but in like I wasn't comfortable. Wasn't comfortable in that much darkness. I wanted to have some more light come through and have it be. Yeah. As I pruned, I really felt shift in the energy. And I became aware that I loved simpler forms that I was creating. Simplicity. There was an openness to the little orchard, perhaps I was in the forest.
Ooh.
Wow. I know that the dream continued on from there, but I kind of lost my thread at that point. Yeah, that's kind of where I lost my thread. And maybe some more will come of sort of how that resolved. At this exact moment, there was a time when I had a little bit, another piece of it, but right at this exact moment, I actually don't have that. So
we might get it back.
Okay.
About 90% of the time through the course of discussing the dream, new details pop up. And there's always the risk we want to be aware of what did Freud call it? Secondary elaboration, where we're trying to actively fill in the gaps. But I think it actually just goes, you know what? Now that you mention that, I can see myself doing another thing. You got to kind of shift the angle a little bit. And then what was behind a column becomes present because you took a step to the left. It's as easy as that sometimes. And then again, we might get nothing at the very end of it. Like that really is where it ends. I know it went somewhere else. I can't remember. Dreams are like that. You get what you get. And I think sometimes the parts that really do stand out and stick with you are I say in my theory, but source me, there you go. I think dreams self-select for importance. The ones you remember are the ones you're supposed to remember for a reason. We hang on to those. And if you don't remember many, you probably still get the benefit of it. It's just more subconscious. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to bed no memory of having a dream, but I wake up with an answer to a question in the morning that I didn't know the night before. And I think I reasoned it out in my sleep. I just don't have a conscious memory of that experience. Maybe this is also part of the root of my fascination with dreams. I don't remember dreaming hardly ever. And I'm kind of jealous of people that do, especially people that can fly in their dreams. Like, you mother, not my path. I'm not going to be upset about that. But okay, so we've got a lot of great material in that. I can't read my own handwriting. Of course not. So it's interesting. If we start breaking this down by maybe some of the objects and experiences we're having, I don't know what I do. I do it differently almost every time. So maybe that's part of the intuitive riding the leaf on the wind, so to speak. But you've got a car, you've got a vehicle, and it's a method of transportation. It's going from moving from one place to another. So you've got right off the bat an icon of travel. You are not standing still. The world is not coming to you. You're trying to get to a destination, perhaps, even if that isn't explicit. You're going somewhere. You're driving. Why are you driving? Well, you're going somewhere. It is, in a way, this retro futuristic, you said, even maybe kind of steampunkish looking car. And there's elements there that are probably, what am I trying to say? Personal taste in some ways, how you see yourself. And I don't know if that resonates, but
Yeah, no, it does for sure.
Because as you were saying, it's like, I don't know if this. I had the sense that this orchard was me. Well, there's a perspective on dreams that every element of the dream is us.
Yeah.
Now, there's a way to take that literally in terms of like every single person in the dreams. No, sometimes your mother in your dream is your mother, and it does reference your relationship with your mother, but it's not like your mother is you. in the dream. So there's elements where it is you and it isn't. But when I say things like the car might kind of be like you or how you see yourself, it also might be how you see, how you're conceptualized. The thought that occurred to me while you were saying that was, maybe you think some of your ideas need to evolve. So you're viewing this vehicle that's been helping you travel as something that's a bit antiquated, but antiquated from even a futuristic standpoint, where like, and that might be where the personal style comes in as well, so how you're conceptualizing it. So you're going somewhere. Is the vehicle I'm using for transportation sufficient to the cause? Well, apparently, in your mind, maybe you think it's not, because for some reason it failed. I mean, going off a cliff is not generally a good thing. It's not something. And actually, you didn't yank the wheel and go, "Fuck this, I'm out," or you know, I'm chitty chitty bang bang, we're gonna fly. You know.
No, and it was kind of like all of a sudden, like I couldn't see very well, and all of a sudden I was off a cliff. You didn't even like see the cliff.
That was right, the poor visibility.
Yeah, so it wasn't even like I saw the cliff and then made a decision, or I saw the cliff and tried to avoid it, or any of those things. No, none of those things. I just all of a sudden was like, oh, here I am now, and you know, like flying off a cliff. Oh, here I am now, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah. So I'm kind of writing these notes to myself as well. So if we conceptualize a mode of travel towards a certain destination as no longer fit for purpose, we might imagine, well, how do I break out of this? And one way is to just wreck it right off a cliff. or here's the thing, is that why am I having this feeling that my vehicle of forward motion is no longer fit for purpose? I don't have the visibility I would like to. I can't see where I'm going anymore. And it's kind of a involuntary type of thing, where it's like, the reason I know this vehicle is no longer fit for purpose is because I can't see. I mean, I've now, it has taken me into a place where there's no visibility, and actually that visibility causes me to have an accident and veer off the path. And I think you would, if you're someone like me, and so this, like, all of these ideas come within me. It's like, I don't like to feel out of control. Now, I don't think I'm the only one. I think it's a pretty common human experience. Yeah. So, but there's other people that have different levels of feeling comfortable with being out of control. There are people who are like, you know, it's like, whatever, man, I just do, you know, and I'm like, good for you. God, I wish I could be that zen about everything. I'm just not. So when I like to feel like I'm directing my own path. And what happens is, if I'm involuntarily shunted off a path, poor visibility, vehicles a little too old for this road, and not getting me where I'm going. It's raining and I don't even have a top on the car. It's like, this is just not good. What happens when we feel out of control? It's like I'm falling. I'm in the grip of gravity, forces beyond my control. And at some point you get separated from the vehicle, and that may be a necessary element of getting where you're going. Like if you stayed in the car, you probably just go down with the car in the water, but instead you separate, you hit the water on your own, and that act of separation. And then there's lots of ways to conceptualize. Okay, so we start with one aspect of Carl Jung's collective unconscious isn't just ancestral memory. It's also the common human condition. We as people, as physically constituted human animals, have a certain relationship with water, and we have certain ways we conceptualize it. We need it to drink. We will drown if there's too much. The ocean is powerful. Rivers are, feed farmland, etc. We have different. So sometimes, and he often spoke of the collective unconscious as a vast. Was that his words or it's my own? I can't remember. But it's like a vast ocean of human experience, personal experience, which is infinitely vast, and that every single human experience, all connected as well, because they're very, very similar, and on that psychic level that some people do and don't believe in. So metaphorically, what are you doing? You're hitting the water. You're entering this vast ocean of the unconscious, perhaps. You're going to the place where the information is, and you've been taken there by a force beyond your control, by the natural pull of gravity. And I just want to stop there for a second and get a little bit of feedback on what I've said so far in terms of, am I on the right track? Are we heading somewhere useful?
Yeah,
Does it
this
feel
is fun.
right? Okay.
This does. This feels energizing. Yeah, so I'm feeling, back to the feeling of my body. I'm feeling energized, connected, and clarified. Like, even hearing you say it, and I say this with respect, like, there's a simplicity to your interpretation, but the simplicity actually provides deep clarity and activation of what I shared.
Very cool. Thank you. And I tell every guest, if you're not feeling it, tell me. No, that's because I rattle a lot of doorknobs, and some of them don't come open. Like, what was it? I was interviewing one gal, and she was talking about this red rain that was like threatening, and I'm like, was this at the time in your life when you had your first menses? Is that possible? And she's like, no, it was more like biblical fire and brimstone. Happy to be wrong. Happy to be wrong if it clarifies where we're going. That just entered my mind. How young were you when you had this dream? And she said, you know, anyway, so I was wrong. I was off. Answers are not in me. I don't care. I don't care if I'm wrong, as long as it gets us where we're going. No, yeah, that's another thing you got to get rid of. And a lot of the ancient teachers talk about, you got to get rid of ego. The answer I give you isn't right because I said it. The answer is right because it's right, no matter who said it. Okay, long story short on that. We'll get back to it. So what happens when you dive into this, if we're on the right track, and you said it kind of feels like we're, so you're separating yourself from, maybe I need to let go of an old way of doing something and embrace something new. I'm going to hit the water, the vast ocean of potential, unlimited potential. It's so deep I can't see the bottom. It's so wide I can't see the end of it. It's the ocean. That's kind of one of our conceptions of the ocean. And it becomes, rather than I'm sinking in water over my head, which that very well could have been your experience. I love counterfactuals too. What didn't happen is you didn't hit the water and drown. It's like, this is not beyond me. No, it was a moment of transformation. Okay, I've crossed a threshold into a new experience, and now I'm in this place. And it's interesting. So it was nighttime, rainy, poor visibility, and this other place is now. Did you have a thought you want to share?
I didn't think. No, I did. I was just like, it was like, aha! I didn't think about that shift.
I love the aha moments too. Yeah, and now you're in a place where it's still night, and it's very interesting. You mentioned color. A lot of people don't. They just don't think of it. But this kind of purplish. What did you say?
Blue.
Purplish blue. And that may be a specific color to you, meaningful to you in some way. You can percolate on that for a minute. But the rain is gone, and there's enough of a light that it's not harsh and blinding, but the landscape is better illuminated. But it's not illuminated enough. Your visibility, the answer you're seeking maybe is still partially obscured. You need to be able to, in a sense, like read the sky, read the stars, see. You need to remove obstacles to your vision in order to move forward, get a better understanding of what's happening. I think that's expressed very well in... You've got this thing. What is it? It's also very interesting that you, okay, so sometimes the sequence of events, or I would say almost always the sequence of events matters, because first you get the lay of the land. You're like, where am I? What's going on here? You see the trees. And then there's this, you know that it's not winter, which would have been interesting too. But there's no leaves on the trees. Now we might leave that one. We might leave that one aside too. It's like, why no leaves on the trees but not winter? That might be one that nothing comes to my mind immediately unless it does for you. That's okay. It doesn't have to. We could set it aside. Like I was saying, instantly you had a knowing. I need to prune the trees. I need to clear the obstacles. So that became very clear. And then the tool appeared in your, so counterfactual, what could have happened? I need to clear these trees. I have no tools. I am unprepared for this job. I am not equal to the task. And so maybe what do? You set about climbing the tree and snapping branches one at a time, and it's taken forever and it's not working. That would be a different thing. But for you, you're like, okay, you're ready for this place. Here's the tool you need to accomplish the job. What is the job? Reduce the obscurant things that are in your path.
It occurs to me now too, which is fascinating. You know, the counterfactual is that I didn't choose to walk out of the forest. That wasn't even a thought, or I didn't choose to leave. I didn't choose to walk out to the meadow or whatever. Maybe I don't know if there was one, but I didn't. I knew that I was where I was. Didn't leave the place.
And there was also it was the emotion as well. I mean, we're getting there, but that's very. You became aware that the trees were all a part of you. So what is speaking to me? Oh, here's another one. Here she goes.
Hello.
Oh, baby girl.
Hello, friend.
This is our oldest girl. She is ancient.
Aw.
She is coming up on 17, 16 years old or
Ooh,
something.
okay. What's her name?
This is, well, we call her Wookie because she looks like Chewbacca. She got that
does.
coloration. But my wife just calls her daughter, ooh, 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 and makes noises, and she comes crying. And she likes to sit on top of my computer because I've got 5 fans, 2 of them on top, and she's like, this is the warmest. It's like her personal sauna.
Nice.
Anyway, she's out of the way now. I was saying about the trees are all a part of me. So, okay, so where I was going with that is whenever we're evaluating our own process, we're like, well, there's probably some things I'm doing that are not conducive to the goal I'm looking for. Those things I got to let go. I got to prune those branches out and say, that's not, if we think of branches as potential paths we could take, you eliminate all the ideas that, well, that's, in my estimation, that's not going to get me where I'm going. That's not a necessary piece of me to carry forward because it's just going to weigh me down or it's going to get in the way. It's not necessary to the process. So you've got this idea of, and various ideas come afterwards, maybe, or they might have come to you in there of like pruning, editing, shifting, all metaphors or direct kind of descriptions of the process of refining who we are, how we're approaching a particular problem. And then you had the thought of life experiences. Yeah, there may be some conclusions you've drawn from experiences that no longer fit or just aren't relevant to a current project. It's like you don't have to change who you are. You just pick certain elements and say, okay, this is the pieces of me I'm going to bring to this project versus that.
Love that.
We don't bring the same parts of ourselves to work in the morning that we do to the marriage bed at night. And that's probably for the best. People have gotten in trouble for that at work. So you probably don't want to do that. Okay, and this is all getting down to the feeling of it. And you did have a, lucid dreams. There's a difficulty for me with lucid dreams. I don't know what to do with them. They cross that boundary. So there's 100% you are aware in your dream. And then there's the alternative view of, well, sometimes we dream that we're dreaming, but it's still a dream and you're not really lucid, but you have the experience of thinking you're lucid. Now, who knows? But I take people at their word. I felt like I was awake. I felt like I could direct things. I had a thought and it happened. Fair enough. I cannot dispute any of that. So at least you referencing the semi-lucid nature of it, of like, I'm kind of aware this is not me in a real place. This is something else. And that's fine. That may also be, if we lean on the materialist side of it, my wheelhouse a little bit more, there may have been a need to acknowledge that you were self-aware of this process, that what you were here to do was to kind of almost on a meta level say, I'm not just doing the pruning, I'm watching myself do the pruning because I got to be sure I'm doing it right. I got to be aware of what I'm doing. So there may be an element of that in there. And then again, it may have been semi-lucid. You might have kind of floated a little closer to consciousness, almost a twilight zone of not quite waking up, and been more aware of the dream as well as yourself as a dreamer. Either one is possible, and possibly both. I couldn't even tell you it's entirely one or the other. And stop me anytime too if you have thoughts.
I just
go
had
ahead.
a realization
Sure.
about all this. Your elucidation of this is really fun. And for some context, we're recording this now mid-February, February 19th. On January 4th, I had a very major ski accident.
Ooh, yeah.
And I'm recovering now, but it's whatever, 6 weeks later. I've been laid out. I had a massive bruise. I'm very lucky that I'm not paralyzed or dead.
I've had experiences like that.
The deep purple bruise I had, almost black from my mid back all the way down to my legs, was massive. And I could really walk for the first few days. And so I've been recovering. And so this dream was just about a week ago, 10 days ago. As I'm recovering now and feeling more normal and more myself from this whole experience of this deep accident. And I didn't relate this dream at all to that accident in any possible way.
Then suddenly it came back to you.
And then suddenly it came back to me and I'm like, oh yeah, I have had to, this has shifted my entire spring of this year. Certainly my plans for January, February have been like pushed back or canceled or in disarray because I've been like, oh wow, I'm and I don't know really, I'm healing, I'm going to be fine, but I don't know that pathway into 100%ness or what that looks like from here. And
Sure.
there's been a lot of uncertainty around that. So it's interesting for me to make that connection because I didn't at all before this conversation.
And there are
This
things.
is the context.
Yeah.
The context of this dream.
Well, normally, and there's something I've been doing intentionally, which I didn't ask you what happened a week ago. Not yet. We're going to get there because I want to go through the dream again, and then we'll go, okay, now that we've discussed all that stuff, what was happening right around the time of the dream? And you, and very often, this is happening more and more, hopefully, as I seem to be getting better at this, or the channel I'm able to open to the forces that are actually helpful gets wider and more solid, and let's call it that. It's no fault of my own, or no benefit.
Sure.
Anyway, long story short, it's something we metaphorically describe as when we have a life-changing event. Say we're like, we start to reevaluate who we are and what we're doing. We start to look at the orchard that we've cultivated of our own life. And it's interesting that for you, the orchard is like, I wasn't sure if it was an orchard or forest, because for you, probably a lot of the trees planted there, you would look at it and go, I didn't plant that. I mean, I did, but I didn't. Or whatever caused that tree to exist there wasn't entirely me. So it's almost half forest, half orchard. Just like you said, it's a more natural space that you inhabit, that you're open to, maybe that one's a tomato plant instead of a peach tree. I don't know how that got there, but maybe I need tomatoes too. We'll just let that be what it is. It's part of the orchard.
Really love that interpretation.
Yeah.
I really love that interpretation of orchard and forest. I didn't, as I said those words, I was just saying them because of what came, but that feels powerful. Thank you. Yeah. Just, the orchard being intentionally, I planted this, and the forest being, this is my surroundings that I didn't necessarily have agency over. Mm-hmm. And I'm in this place of maybe a mix of both of those, or uncertainty around my agency or not in the world.
Oh yeah. And I think that is a great, powerful metaphor for just people in general. Is like, sometimes your orchard is going to have unusual plants in there, and you get to decide, okay, is this a creeping vine? Do I need this out? Is this past trauma that's just going to choke the life out of my, my peach tree? Or am I existing on the edge of a forest where my orchard actually blends into forest? And that's the great unknown. And maybe I find wonderful trees out there too that I never knew existed. But just for you, at least this is a very useful conceptual understanding.
Very much so. Yeah.
And then, okay, now all of this to get us down to the point where you're having feelings. And this is something also people don't often mention colors in dreams, but they are more likely to mention feelings, even though that is also rare. It's like 99% visuals with most people. This happened, that happened, I said, I did. And I'm like, did you hear yourself? No, it's almost like the words just happened. We don't actually, most of us have an experience of sound in dreams even. Very interesting. And of course, deaf people no experience of sound. They'll talk in sign language in their dreams if they know it, that kind of thing. It's fascinating difference that our ability to interact with the world dictates our experience of dreams as well. So getting down to your emotions. Sorry, too many tangents.
Very good.
You weren't exactly scared. You said this wasn't an experience of fear, but there was an ominous quality of discomfort. And you mentioned, I think you used the word uncertainty, and want more. Fuck. I can't read my own handwriting. That doesn't matter. It was something about wanting a better view, but that's not the word I used. Maybe it wasn't
vista. Maybe I wanted the feeling. I'm not sure what words I used, but I know that I wanted. Yeah, a bigger vista. I wanted to see. I wanted more clarity. I wanted more light.
Yeah, for sure.
And I knew that this was the way, was to prune.
Yeah, that is the way to open up more of the sky. And if you're reading the stars, maybe in an esoteric sense, or you're at least letting in more light, the forest canopy tends to block out or absorb that light. My thought when you were saying those things is like, what is ominous but not fearful? And then ominous, I think, comes from omen. It is reading the signs that will tell you, that will predict the future. So if something's, it's almost a feeling of something which is coming. And not necessarily something wicked this way comes, but our doom, our fate, it doesn't have to be bad. I mean, a lot of people discuss it that way, but sometimes we are fated to experience a particular thing, or we know a particular thing is coming, and we may be, what is it? What I'm trying to say, the discomfort we feel about it is not knowing what it is. We know something's coming, but we're not maybe fully in control of it, or we don't know what it is, so we're not sure. We get that fear of the unknown, basically. Like, but it's not. But again, it's not exactly a fear, and then that's good. Now, you could have been terrified. You could have been like, I have to do this, but I don't know what's going to happen. But more, it was like, what I'm doing is going to accomplish something, and it will be something significant. That's, in my mind, that's the doom or fate that was coming at the end of it. Am I using any of those words correctly to describe what you're feeling? And
no, that feels very clear. There's a lot of clarity in your words.
Okay,
Absolutely, for me.
Good
yeah,
deal.
the feeling's clear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Parsing out the intentionality behind that, and I love the omen thing is really interesting. That using that
ominous.
Ominous. Yeah. It wasn't ominous. Yeah. So it
because there's
wasn't
connotations
ominous,
and denotations.
That doesn't mean that it's so is there an omen here? But that doesn't mean there wasn't an omen there. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And the analogy that just jumped into my head is you are soon to be father. A baby is on the way. The omen of the baby is the swelling belly, and it's coming. And now, honestly, a lot of expecting fathers are terrified. I'm going to screw this up. I don't know but you know something's coming. You even know kind of what it is, but you don't know what it's going to be like. You don't know because it hasn't happened yet. You've never had it happen before. If it's your second kid, maybe it's not so terrifying or ominous anymore. Yeah. But if you look at the omen of the swelling belly, you know the due date is coming, and that might be. So in essence, your dream may have something related in this aspect of it to the idea of the process of pruning is now going to result in something like a birth. A new birth, and you're not sure what that's actually going to be, because if you knew what it was, you wouldn't need to clear the branches to show you. Something. Does that feel useful?
It feels right. Yeah. There's something, and I have, that really resonates deeply. Like I have this feeling of this time, and even my accident that I had. I've known the whole time it was a really deep. I call it an accident, but it wasn't an accident. This injury I had. Mm-hmm. Was a deep reset in ways that I don't understand.
Yeah.
A powerful and intentional, physically a bad thing for me, but necessary in some way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, I love it that you put the air quotes around accident, because, I mean, if I did a thing, if I took a risk knowingly, and the very small chances something very bad happens, it kind of, I did that. It was,
nobody hit me. I was skiing down a double black, the most steep black diamond in the ski resort, Heavenly in Tahoe, where I had to go through a gate where there's a skull and crossbones where they say you could die here.
You probably shouldn't go here. Yeah.
I went through the gate where they said, like, you're on your own, be careful. This is a dangerous spot. I was like, oh yeah, great. And then I go down the slope, and then I choose to turn on the speed and go for it, and then I hit a rock.
Yeah.
So there's no one to blame.
Yeah.
Myself, if even myself, right? It's just
yeah. No, and that's why the air quotes on accident. It's like I kind of made this happen, but it was also kind of random. I mean, this is not the outcome I was angling for, and I've had a lot of experiences in life where I turned on the speed and just missed the rock, and I've been. Whoa, that's enough of a shock. That's a wake-up call as well. So for this one to actually have to go through the suffering and the injury and the experience and the pain and there's nothing, what do they say? We were talking about you at the School of Hard Knocks and Stolas and whatnot. That is a very powerful teacher. That is a teacher that will get the message through to most people. I'll tell you what.
You cannot ignore. You cannot ignore
pain. Yeah.
This much pain.
And I mean, for good or ill. And I would ultimately say it's probably for good, because you've heard of the toddlers born without pain receptors, and they just chew on their tongue. They get burns and they cut themselves open and bleed, and they have no idea. You got to watch those kids like a hawk. And then even as they get older, people have to check their body for proper function, because they will break a leg and not feel it. And that's what pain's supposed to do. Is hey, danger, Will Robinson, you've got, if you step on this leg, it's going to further injure, and then you won't be able to walk at all. So long story short, it's like pain is your friend, as they say, as is paranoia and anxiety, but just not too
Love
much,
it.
not too much. But we weren't even quite done yet. And actually, okay, so you started off with that feeling, and it was at some point during the process of the pruning that you shifted and started, and this may not be the, what you said, I might have did my best to write down the essence or idea of it, but that you were almost kind of, there was a shift as you were pruning to be kind of more pleased by the feeling of growing openness, that there was an emotional validation of the process of like, this is the right thing to do. It suddenly feels better now that I can see more, now that my vision is less obscured.
Very much so.
That's kind of what it was like for you.
There was, right now, the word that's come to me thinking into that dream was a calm. There was a calm that came over me, was what the word is now. There was a, like, oh, I can relax a little bit.
So now we've gotten down to the end of the dream. We've looked at the process of it. We've looked at the individual segments. Now that we've kind of opened all that up and you've seen it again to the best that both of us can do, do you remember what comes next? Did that come back to you, or maybe not?
No, it doesn't. But I'm immediately taken back to the car.
Me too. For some reason, I was just like, "Why am I thinking of the car again?"
That with new light, and I'm, like, even with bringing the accident into the dream and my situation, and just awareness of like, oh, if I hadn't gone off the cliff, if I hadn't hit the rock, in the dream in real life, if I hadn't had this experience of a phase shift of now I'm going to be holed up and recovering for a few months, what I see was like, oh, I don't know what it was. It was in darkness, but there was a danger there. And like going off the cliff, it allowed me to fall into this forest where then I did have agency into this, right? I did safely fall into a realm where I could recover and prune, and was given the tools I needed to recover and find the calm again and find the agency that I needed in this new place that was not available for me had I continued on the road in whatever way, wherever that was. And it's not for me to know even where that was, because that place, there was a fork in the road, and I took the road less traveled by.
That actually really cool. Completely off topic, but you may be fascinated by this. I've lately been doing AI music using the words of classic poetry, and that's one of the songs. That was like one of the first songs I did, was The Road Less Traveled By.
You use Frost and you put it into AI and it creates music?
Yeah, there's an AI music generator called Suno, Suno.ai, Suno.ai. And The Road Less Traveled By actually ended up being a kind of folk rock with a fiddle and drums, and you can find it on YouTube /@RealAI Radio. I wasn't going to plug that at all, but I probably should. And there's more of them there. I've got at least 30 of them. I've got probably 10 more. I'm planning on turning almost every famous piece of poetry into an AI song. Shakespeare's sonnet, "Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day?" That turned into a Stevie Wonder's kind of blues funk love song. "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" Oh God, it was beautiful. It was perfect.
That's
but
fun.
anyway,
Okay.
long tangent on
That's
that
a
one.
fun little diversion,
It
right?
really
That's a
is.
fun little...
Hopefully that brings these songs to a new generation, or this classic poetry to a new generation. Last word I'm going to say on this, I would hope, not just for my own success of this channel. What do I care about success on this channel? I want people to hear the music. I want people to appreciate the poetry. I would like high school English teachers to say, "You think Shakespeare's boring? Listen to this." And they get that song and they go, "Wow, that was actually pretty good lyrics." And that's what poetry is. It's lyrics not yet set to music as far as we know. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. I'm very proud of myself sometimes when I have these little ideas and then they turn into a big project. But bringing it back to you, sorry. There's an analogy to life in this dream process as well that you mentioned. When I'm driving in the car and go off the cliff, when I'm skiing and I hit the rock, there are inflection points or happenstance that puts us in an involuntary position to where we have no choice but to reevaluate. So that's very typically something that happens general to the human, again, collective unconscious, common human experience. Well, shit, I got a lot of time to think because I'm laid up and I'm hurt, and I get to think about how did I get hurt. And the first thing that popped into my head is when did I hurt myself the worst? When did I put myself at risk for an accident? And a lot of times it's when I was a little too cocky, when I was a little too hubristic about my own abilities and like, I can handle this, let me challenge myself. And then I did not rise to the challenge as well as I expected. So there may have been at least an element of that in what you were doing of like, what other areas of my life could I, now that I've got the time and plenty of it, think about in a way that puts me less at risk of making a similar mistake and having another accident. So that may have been part of this dream, but then we would also want to look at why didn't this dream come, if this accident happened back on, I think you said January, almost turn of the year, why 6 weeks later? Why, was there a milestone in recovery? Was there a professional opportunity or lack of opportunity? Was there a relationship dynamic? Was there a financial complication? There might be something that happened a week ago where you're like, now this dream makes sense, or this was the genesis of the dream.
Financially,
it's a tall ask. So, but go ahead.
Oh, it's good. I mean, financially, I do work. Obviously, I've shared for myself, and I do these sessions, and I've had to reduce the sessions. I've had to delay courses I'm teaching. And so I have. Absolutely, there's been a financial implication of this for me, for sure.
Okay, yeah.
So that's on my mind as I'm healing. Is like, okay, it is time to get back on that saddle in a more active way for certain.
Mm-hmm.
About a week ago, when this was happening, it was a period when I was feeling very inward focused. I was choosing to cancel plans with my friends. I was choosing to be a deep hermit. I like to say I go into my bat cave and sort of in the darkness, but and I am an introvert and need that space. But at the same time, there was a depth of that was unusual. Just how deeply I needed to. It was how deeply I felt I needed to just really deeply just sit and be and exist. More than doing.
Gotcha. It
was in a period of really deep, being over doing, in a way that even for me was profound. Okay. And I didn't fully there wasn't any clarity even in that. This is about a week ago. I'm out of that now, just in the last handful of days. There wasn't any clarity as to the why, but there was strong clarity as to what you need this.
Sure. Yeah, no, I get that very much.
That's the context of this dream. That's the context of this dream. And so time period around when that was happening.
For sure. No, and I get that too. I am deeply as well, I would say hermetic, but that's actually like a philosophical thing. I'm hermit-like. I think it's very, there are just certain of us who are, like for the rest of the day, I'm not having this type of conversation with anyone, not even my wife. She knows I'm done. I'm done. I need to not see anyone or talk to anyone very much. But then to say, okay, I'm normally this level of, I need my peace and quiet. Now I'm like way up here. I'm not just gone, but around. I'm not even around. I'm nowhere. I'm gone completely in terms of social interactions, responding, but emails, phone calls, paying bills, anything. I'm done. I'm in my shell doing my thing. And those are usually profound times of change and the need of deep thought. So you had that intuitive sense that this is the right thing for me to do. And probably if we connect the dots from the idea of reevaluation to prevent future catastrophe or a repetition of some accident that maybe would have been within our control if we had made different choices. That is a very natural thing to say for a hermit-like person to do, is like, wait a minute, I'm not doing anything until I figure this out, because I don't know exactly what problems I'm supposed to avoid until I understand the lesson. So you might have been pondering, like, what can I take away from this that allows me to move forward successfully? Yeah. And this, maybe around that time, this dream came to you and said, well, what you're going to do is crash out like you did. And your old way of doing things, that old vehicle, in a sense, is not going to get you where you go. And it's actually going to throw you off a cliff. But good news, you got a chance to reevaluate. And if you tend your orchard a little bit and prune the unnecessary branches, get a better look at the situation. You'll come out of it with satisfying the goal of avoiding a similar mistake in the future. You'll make better decisions. What do I need to change about me to succeed in the world and not hit any more rocks while I'm skiing? That seems to me what this dream might have been trying to be about.
Yeah, that feels it feels comforting, and it feels like open. In terms of my body, it feels like open. Oh yes, okay. There's clarity there.
Yeah, and you know, I don't try to determine an answer before I even begin talking to people. This is what we get from just talking to each other. And what I do aim myself at is being useful, beneficial, and that tends to be positive. I mean, I would even say some warnings about negative things are positive in that way of like, well, here's a way to understand it that is useful to you. Now, another question would be, and this either you do or don't. I was chewing my beard up today. Can I keep it out of my face? When, like I described earlier, I'm all over the place. Sorry, I'll start an actual sentence and finish
Perfect.
it. Sometimes I go to bed with a question and I wake up with an answer and I don't remember a dream. So it seems like you didn't ask for this experience, but you may have had some intuitive sense that led to this experience as a way of conceptualizing where you were at and what you were going through. Did you wake up the next day with carrying out that greater sense of, was it peace or pleased by the openness?
No,
you were describing it was a few days later.
I was still in the middle of my deep hermit phase.
Gotcha.
And it was days later, 4 or 5 days later, I started to come out of it.
And
now I'm out of it.
That actually may be why you have this vague sense that there was more to the dream, but you don't remember it because you didn't actually get an answer. You just knew you were engaged in the right process, and the answer was actually a few days away. That's at least one reason to theorize that the dream actually it ended with the feeling that there was more to the dream, even though there actually may not have been. That's a possibility.
And it's interesting because I actually I think I rescheduled this conversation from January, and it was because of my accident.
Oh, yeah.
And so even this conversation around the dream was delayed a month or more ago when we were first scheduled to speak.
And entirely possibly taking place at exactly the moment it was supposed to. Right now, not a month ago.
And I think that
shit blows my mind. It does.
Right? No, I just had that realization like, oh yeah, we delayed this I had to reschedule it.
Yeah.
Based on my accident. Was still in too much of a space. However soon it was very close to that within a few days, I believe.
That is literally why I never get mad at anybody about rescheduling. I'm like, okay, that means it's not now. Fair enough. What do I know?
And when this dream came, I have dreams not every night, but many nights. But when this dream came and I knew this podcast was coming up, this conversation, I knew that this was the dream I wanted to discuss.
Yeah.
And clarify. I've had dreams since.
All this shit blows my mind. I love it.
I've had dreams since, but those were not the ones that were supposed to be kind of having this conversation around. It was this, and I wasn't sure why, because even as I was sharing it with you, I felt, oh, this is a very simple dream. It's not very interesting. There will be nothing to say. That was sort of my inner dialogue around my little dream that I shared with you and the listeners.
Yeah. Well, I'll thank you for that. It makes it a lot easier on me. Appreciate it.
Okay.
I think everybody feels that way of like, we've got an interesting thing with our dreams where like they're endlessly fascinating to us and sometimes boring to other people. Not everybody cares. Oh, you had a dream. Great. I have dreams too. But sometimes even dreams that seem very simple and straightforward hello. She knocked over my phone.
Hello.
There you go. Hi. Her little legs don't work so good, but she's all right. Oh, hey, baby girl. She's probably going to live another fucking 10 years, this one. Sorry for the language. I don't know.
She'll outlive us all.
She's one of those like, I don't know. Anyway, even dreams that seem very simple. It's like once you start talking about it, you're like, man, there's layers. This is
layers.
Crazy. Yeah. And then when you start relating it to your own life and you get those zings and you're like, this actually means something. I can't believe it. I had to do that.
Really
The handful of dreams I've analyzed of my own, like there's like 5 in my lifetime I can remember. If you're interested in those, go back to episode 100. I do 2 of them. I was my own mystery special guest. I just talked about my dreams. Even those were like actually pretty significant once you got beneath the really absurd seeming circumstances. So yeah, that's what I'd say to folks out there. It's like, if you think your dream is too mundane or boring or simple or nobody's going to care, I care. I want to talk to you. I think they are all fascinating. I love the mystery of it. I'd like to imagine myself, a less chemically addicted Dr. House or Sherlock Holmes-ish of dreams. If we do this right together, the dreamer's almost like my Dr. Watson, and we get to the answer together. So never worry about that. And I think everyone has. Long story short, your experience of that, where you're saying, I don't even know if this is really a good thing. Am I going to make a good episode? Yes, you will. Don't worry about it. All the pressure's on me. If I don't come up with something useful or interesting, then I'm the one that looks stupid, not you. Never the dreamer.
But when you get out of the way, that never happens, right? When you get out of the way, that never happens. Right thing always appears, no doubt.
Almost always. Certain. There is one time, I believe it was episode 19, and I entitled it "Going Nowhere" because not only was the dreamer strapped into a chair in the sand in a Roman Colosseum type setting, but like deteriorated, and the sand dunes are coming into it, and he was going nowhere, but we went nowhere with the dream. We couldn't figure it out. So I hold that up as one of my biggest failures, and I think about it a lot. And it's one piece of life advice for the folks out there. Don't let your failures be as much, a source of pain and embarrassment, but as a source of pride of like, I really learned something from that experience. Don't sense of pride is not the right. I screwed up really big on that one, but I had a tremendous opportunity because I gave it my best and did not succeed. And that is worth studying. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's long story short on that.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, do you have any more questions? Any new angles you might want to look at this from? I'm not going to drag it out. If we got something satisfying to you that you can move forward with.
I feel complete with that. I feel really clear. It feels open. I feel good. I feel like clarified and elucidated, and it feels complete for me. Yeah. Thank you.
And now that you've got that, you may or may not have another dream tonight where actually you get to see the next step because we've talked about it, and it's opened the doorway to now you've made yourself ready to maybe see what comes next. I'm gonna just fascinated to hear about that.
Just meditate on that if it happens. Yeah, for sure tonight before I go to bed.
So if you're satisfied, we'll wrap it up.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Well, this has been incredibly fun.
Oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It should be enjoyable. It should be fun. People should, at the very least, feel it was a good use of their time. And I always appreciate that. So, then by way of wrapping things up, I'll say this has been our friend Aaron French from the South Lake Tahoe area, a fellow skier of Heavenly. I've actually been there, not since I was like 9 or 11 years old, but long time ago. He's a medium and Akashic reader, a spiritual mentor for at least the last 30 years. You can find him at naturalheartalchemy.com. Please tell me I'm reading that correctly. That was
and my Instagram also is at Natural Heart Alchemy, the same.
There we go.
Natural Heart Alchemy.
I'll try and put those both in the description there. For my part, would you kindly like, share, subscribe, tell your friends? Always need more volunteer dreamers and viewers for my video game streams Monday through Friday. 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Pacific on YouTube, Rumble, Twitch, Kick, X. I'm everywhere. Maybe BitChute someday. This episode brought to you in part by, I think it's ABC Book 15, The World of Dreams by Havelock Ellis, one of the most famous early 1900s, late 1800s works of its kind. Of course, you can find all this and more at BenjaminTheDreamWizard.com, including downloadable MP3s of this very podcast. Also, if you'd head on over to BenjaminTheDreamWizard.locals.com, building a community there attached to my Rumble account, free to join, no excuses, not to come and say hello and tell me your dreams, and we'll make an episode together. So that is enough out of me. And Aaron, thank you for being here. I have enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks so much. This has been great fun. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Good deal. And everybody out there, thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.